I was in a deep, deep depression in this house while the splits were happening, while the divorces were happening. Every split happened when we were living in this hash knife house.
Is it weird or different not having the help of the whole family for a move?
Like so many other Sister Wives episodes, this one started out softly, unremarkably, and with the feeling that something should be happening but wasn't. Not all of them were moving together, but some were. While Kody and Robyn moved in November of 2024, almost 5 months apart, McKelsie had already moved months before in July. Even though the pacing and timing were off, everything was portrayed with the same breathless desperation as though the family were about to implode. The tornado then struck, this time real, wreaking havoc throughout their meticulously constructed world. Of course, no one was harmed. The family made it through. However, the storm served as yet another handy parallel for their lives. It was noisy, destructive, and eventually left everything intact, if never quite the same. In between the dramatic music cues and the packed boxes, there was the obligatory shredded flat tire. By this point, it was almost humorous, which was a Sister Wives trait. Every time they got on the road, a tire would inexplicably go flat, giving everyone another reason to quarrel. Welcome to TLC Flicks, your ultimate destination for all things reality, drama, and binge-worthy moments. From shocking twists to behind-the-scenes secrets, however, IT was routine rather than tense. Created strife for a family whose actual issues were not shown on screen. The show was dominated, as usual, by Kody and Robyn. This time their new home, their lavish home, was their preoccupation. They were constantly discussing it, flaunting it, and protecting it. The area they had referred to as the Brown family's legacy, Coyote Pass, was only sold because they needed the money. They acknowledged that the house was well out of their price range. However, Robyn wanted to provide Kody with the luxury he desired. They referred to it as 40% bigger, but the calculations revealed otherwise. This new McMansion was 5,500 square feet in size, compared to 4,500 square feet in their previous one. Yes, there was 1,000 square feet more, but it wasn't the palace, they said. It was a financial trap with finer draperies, not a dream house. Depending on who was being overly dramatic that day, a nearby guest house added an additional 1,200 or perhaps 2,000 square feet. Nevertheless, it was a sign of desperation masquerading as prestige rather than success. However, as Kody and Robyn showed off their purported dream, Dayton's absence was more noticeable than anything they said. Where had he gone? No presence, no mention, no justification. Nothing but quiet. And that stillness seemed to be the most authentic aspect of the episode for a family that based their entire existence on being visible. However, the actual narrative was not being told on television. It was taking place on the internet. Madison Brown, Kody's daughter, started responding to fan inquiries on Instagram over the weekend. For once, a family member was not afraid to express what everyone else was thinking. Your dad saying lies about you for the entire world to hear teaches you real quick, Madison said in a quiet, resentful response to a follower's question about her father. Despite its briefness, the statement had a sharp edge. One fact emerged from years of deceit and manipulation. Madison had seen right through it all. She talked about how difficult it is to maintain boundaries, particularly in dysfunctional households. She stated it's acceptable to say no, to take your time answering, and to keep your peace. She saw these lessons as survival skills rather than abstract concepts. You learn that sometimes the only true boundary is distance when you are raised by individuals who turn silence into guilt and love into control. The subject that everyone was curious about was then posed. Had Robyn ever made an effort to make amends? Robyn had stated on the show that she had made an effort, that she had contacted the children and wanted to make amends. However, Madison's response was direct and decisive. Robyn is lying. The conclusion. If her mouth moves, she's manipulating in such a calculated way that you won't know up from down, she continued. She lies to a degree that I haven't yet witnessed being repeated. Like thunder, the word struck. Robyn had portraying herself for years as the misunderstood wife, the outsider who was wrongly assessed by the others. However, Madison claimed that beneath that gentle voice and those quivering tears came something far more sinister. Manipulation, so profound that it altered reality itself. The same was said by many who had known Robin in Montana before to the program. They characterized her as emotionally shrewd, intensely competitive, and preoccupied with being the victim, the best, or the favorite. She couldn't tolerate being overshadowed, even as a young lady. For years, there had been a rumor circulating about Robin and her former spouse, Preston. Preston harbored affections for Fawn, her younger sister, prior to their marriage. Robin couldn't stand the idea of being second choice, but they never dated. After pursuing and winning him, she became resentful of him for not showing her enough love. She later accused him of wrecking her, stealing her purity, and being abusive on national television. In the meantime, she subtly revoked his parental rights and rewrote history to fit her own narrative. Robin was the injured dove to the world. It was fate, according to many who knew her, and she was the one who set the traps. Madison didn't hesitate when asked what it was that finally made her realize that Kody and Robin were only interested in themselves. She claimed that she started reading parenting literature in 2020. She began to see the patterns at that point. The deception. The emotional neglect masquerading as family and faith. She couldn't take her eyes off it once she saw it. Ever thereafter, she never turned around. The actual drama was therefore developing elsewhere, in the pauses between their performances and in the words of their kids, who no longer trusted them, while the cameras followed Kody and Robin as they moved into their enormous, expensive home. The program could continue to pretend, but the world had changed. The tornado passed through. The tires were torn. Another set of interviews was conducted with the family. However, the fact that the Browns were no longer a family reverberated louder than ever behind each confessional and well-planned moment. They were a story, and the characters had finally finished their roles. That afternoon, the air was heavy with the oppressive heat of the desert, slowing down everything. As clouds collected, the cameras moved across the vast Arizona sky, which was black, heavy, and full of danger and promise. The weather changed somewhere between the commotion of moving boxes and the quiet between Robin and Kody. A warning of a tornado. The family hurried. Doors slammed, kids yelled, and the wind picked up as if the cosmos had had enough of the Browns acting like nothing was wrong. It swirled with everything they attempted to conceal, making it more than just a storm. Robin called for calm. Kody yelled commands, and for a brief instant, the show had a genuine sense of fright and unadulterated horror. The storm then passed as swiftly as it had appeared. Nobody was harmed. No house was destroyed. Another drama that has been carefully prepared for the upcoming episode. However, hurricanes tend to leave behind evidence. The corners are dusty. Cracks that nobody discovers right away. The family made it through, but after that, something felt heavier, as though the tornado had stolen the last vestige of the truth that had once resided in that house. They packed up once more a few days later. Even though everyone pretended it hadn't, the atmosphere had changed. Their caravan of cars was tracked by the cameras as they traveled the lengthy highway. Then the droning, dreary buzz of rubber dying on asphalt was heard. Even before the automobile halted, Kody let out a sigh. Never again. One more tire that has been torn. One another postponement. One more moment that should have had significance. Robin tried to smile through the camera, but her tiredness was evident. Every trip had it like clockwork, with a flat tire to add plot points. Although fans made jokes about it, it was more than a coincidence at the time. It was customary. Every time the Browns attempted to advance, something went wrong. Dust settled over Kody as he knelt next to the wheel. His voice was tense as he responded, "We'll fix it." However, he didn't seem persuaded either. Robin sat in the back seat and gazed out the window. She wasn't staring at the broad desert that spread in front of her indefinitely. She was thinking about a future she couldn't afford, a mansion she hadn't yet purchased, and a life she couldn't manage without making up a new tale. The van appeared tiny against the limitless highway as the camera drew back, a family of broken hearts feigning that their biggest issue was a flat tire. However, neither the tire nor the tornado nor even the move caused the actual harm. The implicit truth that this wasn't terrible luck was revealed in their silence. There was a pattern. Additionally, they consistently made the incorrect turn whenever the road split. The land, which they named Kody Pass, was always the foundation of the Brown family's goal. It was meant to be their legacy, a location where all of their wives, children, and stories could coexist. But when pride and money are involved, dreams tend to change. The dream had shifted by the end of 2024. Kody Pass was now a debt that needed to be sold. It was no longer the center of their family. And Kody and Robyn didn't think twice when they discovered their perfect house, a massive home that gleamed like a mirage on the edge of Flagstaff. They referred to it as luxurious. They referred to it as fate. In reality, though, it was a last-ditch effort to restore the stability that had been lost. The camera panned up as they stood at the edge of their new home, capturing the enormous masonry and archways, as well as the glistening windows that overlooked nothing but arid air. Robyn's eyes were bright as she clasped her hands together. "It's simply so large," she muttered. Kody grinned with pride. 40% larger than the previous location. However, that was untrue. Not at all. The size of their previous home was 4,500 square feet. 5,500 were in the new one. An expansion of 1,000 square feet cost them almost everything. They did not disclose the source of the down payment. They made no mention of the fact that it was funded by the sale of Kody Pass, that sacred area. The field that was supposed to bring the family together was now gone, replaced by chandeliers and high ceilings. Despite the heat in Arizona, the interior of the house felt cool. There was no warmth despite the fact that every surface shone and every nook was flawless. Robyn referred to it as a blessing. Kody referred to it as an investment. However, the sound of their footfall revealed the reality when the camera followed them upstairs. The house was empty. Robyn attempted to explain their actions when they were together in the living room later. She smoothed the folds of her skirt and whispered softly, "I know people will think we're being extravagant. But this is for the future of our family." Kody nodded, his tone firm yet resolute. "You have to give up one dream for another sometimes." It was always intended for Kody Pass to be more than simply dirt. It was meant to be what we created of it. And we're doing that now. However, he stated it without glancing at her. He turned to face the camera. The new driveway was covered in sand that had been lifted into the air by the wind outside. Nothing constructed on shifting ground can last for very long. The desert appeared to be whispering. Even Kody's confidence faltered in later confessional footage. He acknowledged that they couldn't afford the house, that it had been funded by them. The situation was tight. Nevertheless, he maintained the same flimsy smile that had gotten him through all of his unsuccessful schemes. His words were, "We'll figure it out. We always do." The reality was very straightforward. They were already drowning. The luxury was a trap with more attractive barriers, not freedom. Robyn wandered the deserted hallways by herself that evening, while the family's boxes remained unopened. Like veins of light that were unable to reach her, the chandeliers cast long shadows on the floor. She stopped in the entrance to one of the new bedrooms, which may have been for visitors or perhaps the kids who no longer came by very often. She briefly believed that she could hear faint laughing coming from a different existence, one in which the family was still talking and the home was still filled. However, the sound was only the wind blowing through the window frame's fractures. She looked aside. At last, the Brown family had constructed their ideal house. Beautiful, costly, and destined to sink, it stood on nothing but sand beneath its high ceilings and glossy floors. The huge new mansion echoed with emptiness as the moving vehicles came and went. Like specters of their former existence, boxes littered the corridors, but Robyn and Kody pretended that the quiet was tranquil while grinning for the cameras. The program presented it as a new beginning. However, viewers picked up on something that was not discussed in the broadcast. Dayton was where? Not only was his absence odd, it was eerie. The son who used to show up at family dinners, who would shyly grin in images of the holidays, was just no more. No updates, no pictures, not even a casual remark. He seems to have been subtly removed from their lives. Robyn didn't mention his name. Not once. Talk about bedrooms and square footage, furniture deliveries, and mortgage payments filled the house. but her oldest child was never mentioned. Online, fans started to wonder, where is Dayton Brown? Why doesn't anyone mention his name? Week after week, the quiet got thicker. Some claimed that he was now living alone, working in silence, and avoiding the commotion. Others thought he had completely cut himself off from the family because of the cameras, the drama, and the never-ending loop of excuses and guilt. One thing was certain, regardless of the truth, his disappearance spoke more than words could. Even Robin felt the weight of it behind closed doors. She stood at the top of the stairs late one evening, gazing down at the light from the foyer lights bouncing off the marble floor. The house felt unfinished even though it was lovely, cold, spotless, and unaltered. The room she had originally thought would be his was only down the hall. Silently, she opened the door. Except for a tidy bed that had never been used and a pile of boxes, it was deserted. Her face was unreadable as she stood there for a long time. Then, as though closing a chapter she didn't want to talk about, she turned away and shut the door. Kody sat in his leather chair downstairs, gazing at nothing. His artificial smile was captured by the show's cameras as he spoke of new beginnings and moving forward, but his eyes were far away. Along with his wives and land, he had also lost his children's silent trust, one by one. The missing son wasn't just someone who wasn't in the picture. He represented everything that had vanished as Kody sought to maintain the appearance of control. Long shadows stretched across the soil that had previously been Coyote Pass as the lights from the new mansion gleamed against the night sky out in the desert. Like voices calling from a period when the family was still together, the wind blew soft murmurs across the wide air. However, the boy who used to smile softly in the background was nowhere to be seen in the shiny hallways of the new house, nor were there any sounds of laughing or footsteps. Just not there. And that silence was louder than any quarrel they had ever had, for the first time. Madison Brown broke her quiet while the sun was sinking on the desert. It happened on her own terms, on her phone, in the private realm of her Instagram stories, not on TV, not through a confessional, and not through a plotline that was approved by the producer. She had avoided the public drama for years. While the family was fracturing behind the scenes into silence and animosity, she had observed from a distance while her father and Robin crafted stories of misinterpreted love and family unity. But something changed in her that night. On social media, she posted a Q&A saying, "Ask me anything." Questions about marriage, motherhood, and growing up in a reality TV family were among the many that flooded in. However, one query broke through the cacophony. How do you handle your father's deception about you on national TV? Her response was succinct, direct, and heartbreaking. You learn a lot quickly from your dad telling lies about you for everyone to hear. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even resentment. It was fatigue, the type that results from years of witnessing someone who never truly saw you rewrite your tale. It had taken Madison years to realize the full scope of the manipulation she had been exposed to as a child. Family values are the cover for the half-truths. Guilt masquerading as leadership. The public perception that portrayed Kody as a patriarch when, in fact, he was a guy whose pride was causing him to crumble. Something changed in the sister wives community as fans shared her remarks. Kody started to lose the notion that he still had a chance to make amends with his elder children. Madison was just speaking the truth. She wasn't leveling charges. Furthermore, truth was the one uncontrollable element in a family that was based on appearances. She sent out another message later that evening. This one is more contemplative and gentler. She discussed boundaries and how difficult it is to set them, particularly when doing so means defending yourself against those who could accuse you of betraying your trust. Make it about you, she wrote. This must go on. This will be for my family. I apologize, but I'm not available at this time. It's acceptable to not respond right away. Give it some thought. Setting limits helps you stay sane. Thousands of people found resonance in her words. It was a revelation for fans. It was a reckoning for Robin and Kody. Madison didn't dramatize, name names, or raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her tone of calmness conveyed that she had found serenity away from the tumult and that she had no intention of returning. Kody lost another daughter, but this time it was through insight rather than rage. Online debates erupted in the days that followed. Madison received a ton of support, with people complimenting her honesty and strength. Beneath the accolades, however, was a shared recognition that Kody was no longer the one telling the Brown story. The kids had discovered their own voice. Additionally, Madison's was the first that was unstoppable. When she placed her phone down and turned out the light that evening, she no longer felt the pain she had before hearing about her family. Yes, there was sorrow, but it was pure, like the quiet after a storm. She had lived her entire life witnessing the transformation of the people she cared about into characters. She could now at last be herself without the cameras, editing, or lying. Kody Brown's expansive, reverberating home, a testament to all he believed he desired, was surrounded by an interminable stretch of Arizona desert. Costly. Great. Empty. No longer did disputes or even laughter reverberate through the walls. Nothing but quiet. The silence that forces you to confront yourself. One early morning, he was sitting at the kitchen table with his hands encircling a chilly coffee mug. After yet another tearful and tense night, Robin had retired to her room hours ago. For two people who no longer shared a common language, the house seemed too large. A stack of unread mail, including property tax notices, a lawyer's letter, and a yellow envelope with recognizable handwriting, was sitting on the counter. Christine, after staring at it for a while, he eventually opened it. Kody, this is no longer about assigning blame. All I can hope is that you find peace. Instead of a leader who gives lectures, the children need a father who listens. You could realize the difference one day. Christine. After reading the words again, he folded the paper with care, treating it like a delicate object. Anger was what he wanted. He wanted to accuse her of inventing history and brand her ungrateful. However, he was unable to. No more. Because Kody felt in her heart that she was correct. He later strolled out to Coyote Pass, the place where he had previously envisioned leaving a legacy. Dozens of offspring, 4 wives, and a common goal. It was what he used to call a family complex. It was just dirt now. He stared at the open area where the dream ended while standing in the chilly breeze. He had spent years trying to use control to foster harmony. Although he had referred to it as leadership, it was actually fear of losing one's position of authority, allegiance, or identity. As he stood there, he became aware that he already had. They had slid away one by one. Mary's quiet, Christine's power, Janelle's autonomy, and Madison's truth, the one that broke through his last remaining delusion. Kody sat by himself in the living room that evening. No cameras. Not a producer. Only him. Searching for Sister Wives Madison Instagram, he opened his laptop. Clips, screenshots, and commentary videos were the most popular results. Followers praised her honesty and referred to her as the real one. On one of the videos, he pressed play and saw his daughter quietly address her fans. She exuded confidence and freedom. Her smile was genuine, not the courteous one he had remembered from earlier times. He stopped the video and fixed his gaze on her face. He didn't see contempt or rebellion for the first time in a long time. A woman he saw had recovered from him. The notion was like a kick to the stomach. When did I become the villain? He murmured, leaning back in his chair with flaming eyes. Nobody responded. After that, the days blended together. Kody ceased phoning the children. He ceased filming the show's updates. Robin made an effort to maintain the status quo, but even she was deteriorating. Her tears were hollow and her apologies had become habitual. Using the same roads he used to go to see his wife, Kody began taking lengthy, solitary journeys across the desert. Every turn evoked a memory, such as arguments in the driveway, laughs in the car, or vows that seemed sacrosanct at the time. Now it all seemed like parts of a canceled television program. He parked his pickup on a ridge with a view of Flagstaff one evening. Gold and scarlet streaks painted the sky as the sun sank. I thought I was doing the right thing, he said in a whisper to the void. I believed I was keeping us together. He heard the truth, which he had been avoiding for years, somewhere in the silence, but the wind didn't respond. They weren't being held together by him. They were being held back by him. And now that he had no one else to manage, Kody Brown finally encountered the one person he was unable to avoid, himself. The man who created a kingdom, and then saw it fall apart. The father who lost all of his children despite preaching unity. the spouse who insisted on loyalty and ultimately found himself completely and tragically alone. Kody remained silent as darkness descended over the desert. No cameras. No admissions. The final remnants of the empire he previously referred to as family were carried away by the wind's hum. The kids that Kody formerly attempted to manage were quietly starting their own lives while he sat by himself in his expansive home. They weren't watching television to see the drama play out. They were learning, they were living, and above all, they were speaking their own truth. Madison took the lead. She had a voice much bigger than the cameras in her father's house could ever have because to her Instagram stories, which had already gone viral. She didn't stop there, though. She began journaling her experiences and sharing her thoughts on self-preservation, motherhood, and setting limits. Her honesty struck a chord with fans, and her siblings did too. They started to emerge from the shadows of Kody and Robin's story one by one. Some people messaged Madison privately to ask for help and to share their personal stories of being controlled and manipulated. Others discreetly left, opting for self-reliance over public validation. The understanding that family didn't have to imply obedience and that love didn't have to entail quiet was a common topic in all of the discussions. Janelle's kids were doing well in the interim. They had become used to living without continual supervision, creating little oases of independence that let them act and think freely. In a same vein, Christine's girls were cautious, aloof, and fearless. Even the youngest kids, who had previously thought of the home as a place with rigid rules and unseen hierarchy, were gradually realizing that their world might exist apart from the show's perspective. What about Dayton? He was the most resilient, but he was also the quietest. He had created his own life, discreetly separating himself from the family's ongoing conflict, and was absent from the chaos on camera. He may not have been visible to the outside world, but he was already free, demonstrating that autonomy wasn't merely feasible but essential. Kody and Robin's control over the family dissolved as the kids grew up. Social media evolved from a platform to a stage where the truth, authentic voices, and patterns might be revealed. Additionally, the children's father's kingdom of control disintegrated the more they shared. Your dad telling lies about you for the world to hear teaches you real quick, Madison had stated initially. Her siblings were now rapidly, acutely, and irrevocably learning the same lesson. The once dominant family, whose narrative had been shaped by Robin's machinations and Kody's dominance, was transforming into something else. Reality, not mayhem, drama, or spectacle. The kids were reclaiming it. Individually, border by border, narrative by narrative. Madison got her siblings together in a small group one evening. Aside from the cameras, the criticism, and the expectations, crickets and a far-off desert wind filled the still night air. She stated quietly, without showing any signs of weeping, "We cannot change the past. However, we have a choice in what we allow to happen in the future. We are not required to be a part of their narrative. We are able to create our own." Additionally, the Brown children experienced power for the first time in years, something they had never experienced at their father's home. Not the dominating kind. Not the controlling kind. Not the kind that demands obedience or allegiance. But the liberating sort. Like their potential, the desert outside seemed boundless, open, and expansive. And they entered it fearlessly for the first time. The kids were getting up. And Kody, by himself in his lavish home, was witnessing the results of a lifetime of decisions in a silence he could no longer control. The mansion shone in the morning light, its windows immaculate, its walls polished, its chandeliers shining flawlessly on the deserted floors. Kody and Robin maintained their meticulously staged smiles while on camera, acting as though the house was a sanctuary, a new beginning, or a new chapter. However, the truth was far different. It was all a gilded cage. The lavish home, the financial risk, the expansive guest suites. It had been constructed to project control, power, and success. The persons it was supposed to contain, however, had already made their getaway. The kids had left. Online, Madison's voice reverberated, unadulterated by television producers or familial norms. Dayton's, Janelle's, and Christine's are all aloof, prioritizing independence above duty and integrity over output. The so-called Brown family legacy, the land that had originally been Coyote Pass, was sold. Its associated recollections had also vanished. Robin and Kody had exchanged their past for square space, and it had not made them any closer. The illusion was crumbling even within the house. Robin kept walking into spaces that seemed too large, too silent, and too empty. Kody roamed the hallways, gazing out the windows at views of the desert that he was no longer able to show his kids. Their marriage, which had been based on mutual reliance and aspiration, was now on the verge of discontent and fatigue. Nothing was really captured by the rolling cameras. Every family moment had turned into a play, with every tear and every laugh orchestrated. They had already been deserted by reality. Outside, as always, the desert was vast and deserted. Dust, secrets, and remnants of the past were blown away by the wind. An empty house with walls, but no family was all that remained of Kody's once vast and glorious empire of control. They had been after appearances for years. A larger home, more space, ideal vacations, and flawless smiles. They had used faked confessions, cameras, and approval ratings to gauge their progress. Unfiltered and unprocessed, however, life had a different metric: the liberty of the children. Madison's truth. The separation they had asserted from deceit, control, and manipulation. As the sun sank over the desert horizon that evening, Kody and Robin stood side by side on the balcony. Gold, red, and purple were stunning hues that served as a reminder of beauty that didn't need approval. Kody looked across at Robin. "We took every possible action, correct?" With a tiny flimsy smile on her lips, she shook her head. "We made an effort. However, we might have been pursuing the wrong objectives." There was complete silence in the rooms below. Only recollections remained of the family they had known and attempted to manage. They had spent more than money on the mansion, with its marble floors, chandeliers, and guest rooms. They had lost their connection as a result. They had lost faith as a result. They had lost the kids they had previously clung to. And there was no cheering amid the dry wind. Not approved. Just the truth. The lavish delusion had fallen apart. However, the kids flourished in the freedom of distance, away from the walls. They had taken back their lives, their voices, and their independence. Kody and Robin eventually realized that the story they had attempted to control was no longer theirs to tell, somewhere in the deserted mansion. The cameras would continue to record. The program would continue to air. However, the Browns' actual legacy and reality had long passed, and the wide, unforgiving desert silently and permanently preserved its secrets. Let us know in your comments. And stay tuned by subscribing our channel to get more updates like this. Thanks, everyone.